Okay, so what we're going to be building is a to-do list application in jQuery. We can actually take a look at what it looks like live. If we do laundry, um, let's do get eggs. So you have all these options and you can cross them off. You can delete items. We're going to go ahead and do that today, and we'll also add the ability for you to edit those items. So what we've got here is just HTML. This is all using Bootstrap. If we pop over to our editor, you can take a look at this here. We're including Bootstrap. We're including our own CSS file, which will be over here. Right now we have nothing inside of it. We have jQuery being included, and then we have our own JavaScript file, which we also have nothing inside of yet. In our body, we have a container, which is pretty typical of Bootstrap. Inside that, we have a row, and we just have a bunch of classes here for defining how we want our rows and columns to be set up. We have an input box that is going to allow us to get the text out of it so that we can add new items to our list. And then we have a button which allows us to submit and add the item that is entered into our input field into our to-do list. Our to-do list is going to be represented by a UL, unordered list. We've given this an ID of to-dos so that we can access it in jQuery. And we don't need to add anything into the actual list at this time. So when we first load the page, you'll see the ability here to add items without any of this actually functioning, and then no items down below. So let's go ahead and start off with our JavaScript. So in jQuery, we want to call document.ready so that any code that we run inside of this will actually run once we know that the entire page here has loaded. It's very important that we know that all these elements have loaded on the page before we write any code here. So the first thing we want to do is get the text that's inside of this text box, and we want to be able to grab that text and put it into our list when we press this button. And so the first thing we want to do is add an event listener to this button that will grab this text and place it into our list. If we inspect this button, we'll see here that there is an ID of add item to that. So we can start off with a selector for pound add item dot on and click. So this will go ahead and create an on click event handler so that when we click that button, we'll run this function. We now want to get the value of this text box. So this text box has an ID of new to do, which we can see if we inspect it. So what we're going to do is grab that ID, but we want to make sure we go ahead and add the pound sign to the beginning. And to get the value of a text box, we can do .val. So now let's go ahead and put that in a variable, and we'll call it new to do text equals. And if we were to alert this out to the screen right now, we can see that it is working. Add to do should be working, but let's see what's going on here. New to do.val, alert new to do text, add item.click. Let's make sure that our JavaScript is being loaded on the page, and it looks like we have an error. So to do JS line 1 function. There we go. So now we'll get an alert that says do laundry. So let's go ahead and take a look at this now. We have this event handler which fires a function. This function right now is just alerting our text, but we can make that better. So what we want to do is we want to add this value to our LI. We want to create an LI and add it to this UL list. So what we can do is take the ID of that list, which is to-dos, and append an item to it. So if we go ahead and do this, this will add a new item to our list. But we want to actually add the new to-do text into our list. So now when we click on this and this event fires, we will grab the value and append it to our list. Let's go ahead and test that. Do laundry, add. There's our first item. Let's get eggs as the next item. So there's another item in our list, and this is just a standard UL. So now that we have that working, we also want to clear this text out once someone has added the button. And so we can go ahead and access this same field, new todo.val. Instead of getting the value, we want to set the value to a blank string, and so we're going to pass it a blank string. That blank string, we're going to go ahead and say test. We hit enter. You'll see that test has disappeared from here. Do laundry, add, and it disappears from there as well. So that's a pretty good start for our add item function. We can now actually rewrite this whole function here. If we bring this down, we can give this a name like function add item, and we can call add item from up in our event handler. And this is just a way for us to clean up our code a little bit, because as we add a delete and a completed function, we can come in here and create functions for function delete item and function complete item. Okay, so now we have our items here, and we want to be able to add the ability for us to complete an item and delete an item. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is add a, let's go ahead and grab something from Bootstrap. We're going to add the trash can icon from the glyph icons. So if we search for trash, we'll see here that this is what a trash can icon looks like. So we can do span, and we're going to put a class equals glyph icon trash. The way that glyph icons work is that they just need a container. In this case, this is a span. So if I go ahead and save this, refresh our to-do list, and try to add an item to it, you'll see that we get that trash can there. It's right up alongside the text, which is not great, but we'll fix that a little bit later. So on the front end, I want to add a checkbox. So I can do that by adding an input type equals checkbox. And you'll see here that if we then save that test, we have a checkbox and a trash can. Again, we'll clean up the CSS in a little bit here so that it's a little bit easier to see. But what we want to do right now is give this checkbox a class. And I'm going to call this one complete item. And this class will allow us to select it when we have lots of items in our to-do list. We want to be able to fire when this checkbox gets checked. So we've got a class for our checkbox. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we might call that. So normally we called add item, and we could do the same with this class with .complete item. The issue is at the time that this code is run, these elements, so this input box, does not exist on the HTML page. These two lines for our event handlers will run when the page is loaded, and there are not yet any input checkboxes or delete buttons on the page right now. So we can't actually do .complete item .click complete item, because nothing will happen. The event will be bound to an item that doesn't exist, and the function will never fire. However, we can bind this to something that is already on the page. So in this case, we have our UL ID equals to-dos. Our list items are going to end up inside of there. So we can rewrite this to be to-dos .on click, and they're allowing us to pass in a new parameter, which is when we click on any children of to-dos that have the class of complete item. So in this case, complete item is coming from here, but what it's going to do is it's going to put this complete item on click handler onto this element to-dos. So we can now fire the complete item when this is clicked. However, click events don't fire reliably when you're using an input checkbox. So we actually have the ability to do a change. So when this input checkbox goes from true to false, or checked to unchecked, or unchecked to checked, this would allow us to detect that change. So we have todos.onChange.complete item, and this will fire this function, which will say mark this as done. So now we can say do laundry, and when we check the checkbox, we now know that we would now mark it as done. Now, marking something as done can be done as simply as adding a class to our list item that puts a line through it and sets the opacity. So in our CSS, I'm going to create a done class, and there is a nifty little text decoration property that we can say line through. Let's get rid of that. Line through. And line through will just draw a line through our text. We also want to just make it a little bit transparent. So I'm going to set it to 50% opacity, and that should be good. So instead of alerting that we should mark this as done, what we're going to do is we're going to try to target the element that we have checked the checkbox on. So if I add another item, how do we know which one of these checkboxes has been fired? So in jQuery, we can do what is called, we have access to this. So here we have $this. At this point in time, if you were to output this to the console, this will be that one checkbox that we checked. So this is the item that fired the event. And in this case, we're going to grab this checkbox. But what we want to do is we want to add a class to this li here. And so the li is the parent of this input checkbox because it's inside of the li. So I can get to the parent by using .parent. And we can actually add a class to this. So what I'm going to do is add that done class to the parent when we complete the item. So now let's go ahead and check out our list, do laundry, and check the checkbox. So that went ahead and did a strike through, but you'll see that as we toggle this, it doesn't take it off. So doing add class was useful for adding the class, but what we want to do is we want to remove it if it's already there. So we can actually do toggle class, which will add and remove the done class as we toggle the checkbox. So let's do test. And now you'll see that that line is coming and going as we check the checkbox. It looks like our opacity is not working though, so let's go check that out. And let's change, I believe this actually is a number from 0 to 1. So 50% is going to be 0.5. Let's try another item here. There we go. So now it's become slightly transparent. And we still have to clean up the CSS a little bit, but we can get to that next. So we have the ability to complete an item, and now we want to have the ability to delete an item. The delete item is going to work just the same way that we have here for the input checkbox. The difference is that we're going to be using a button, and we can do a click on that. So I'm going to add a new class to this span called delete. We could technically call it off of this trash class, but I'm going to go ahead and add my own. Let's do delete item. And what we can do now is copy the same line, and we're going to do a click event on .delete item. So again, this is saying when we click on an item with a class of delete item inside of to-dos, then fire the function. So we're going to change this to delete item, and this will also come in handy. So we have this. We want to go get the parent again. And then to delete our li from the page, so at this point this .parent is equal to this li, we can do remove. And this will just strike the whole item from the screen. So if we add a couple of these in here, you can now come in here and delete them. So now we have the ability to add items, complete items, and delete items. So let's go ahead and clean up our CSS a little bit here. So we know that we have access to to-dos And let's go ahead and get rid of the bullets. So we can do that with text style, text, let's do list style type, none. Let's refresh that. So that should get rid of our checkboxes. Let's go ahead and get rid of any margin and padding that might be there. So now we've got that lined up there. Now for our to-dos li, so this is going to apply to each list item, we can actually add a little bit of padding. Let's do 20 pixels on the top, 0 pixels, 20 pixels on the bottom, and 0 pixels on the left. So now if we add an item and add another item, you'll end up with them spaced out a little bit. We want to also be able to take this trash can and send it all the way to the side. So we can do that with #todos.delete item. Or if you would like to, you can just go ahead and do .delete item. And we're going to say float right. Let's go ahead and add a new element. And now the trash can is off to the right. Because the trash can is a glyph icon, which is a font, we can actually set the color of that. So I can grab my color here, and we're going to go ahead and say that is going to be our color. Say add, and now the trash can has a red tint to it. Just so that you can tell the user that this is clickable, we can actually change the cursor to a pointer. So cursor equals pointer. Now when we add a new item, you'll see that the cursor changes. And let's also add something for complete item, which will be, we want to add some margin right, it's about 15 pixels, so that we add some spacing to our checkbox. And it looks like that's not going to work here. Let's inspect this. So it looks like Bootstrap has a margin that's automatically assigned to checkboxes. So 4 pixels 0, 0. So I'm actually going to override this. So let's go ahead and do input type equals checkbox, and we'll do margin right 15. We'll do a test again, and now you'll see we have a nice amount of space between there. One last little trick that we can do is border bottom 1 pixel solid, and let's do a silvery color. And if we add new items, you'll see that we now have a line separating these. It looks like Bootstrap's already using a color here, so we can actually go grab that same color, which is EEE. I was using CCC, so let's change that to EEE. Test, and now you'll see that it matches almost identically to the top. Perfect. So that is how to do jQuery for adding and deleting and completing items. If we check off each of these items and delete them.